Another week of summer closer to the CFL season kicking off. Don't forget you can use that promo code CFL and get yourself some great deals on all things Sawdust City Beer. And of course, we are always joined by Sam Corbeil of Sawdust City Beer, the brewer and co-founder out there at Sawdust City in beautiful, rainy Gravenhurst as we are taping this today. Sam, we've been talking about the weather being up and down throughout the summer. I was saying to you before we started, it feels like it's a little bit of a rainy summer day where I am down in Hamilton, out by the Hamilton Airport in Mount Hope. And today we're doing something that might be a great rainy day beer as well, which is, of course, the Gateway Kölsch. And introduce your friend Ian here and explain, before we get into the Kölsch, why we have a special guest in attendance.
Well, Ian's my good friend here from back in the day. He's from Bracebridge as well. And when I started doing the Sawdust, first ever iterations of Lone Pine and Golden Beach and Gateway Kölsch, I did them on his stove in Toronto. And it's been about 10 years. So Ian was in town and I wanted to bring him in and have him in talk about, what, as a home brewer, what it's like, still being in the beer world.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Ian, before we crack these things open, I want to ask you, why did you allow Sam to invade your house and your stove?
That's a good question. I suppose it was just for the spoils that would come after. just the temptation of being the tester and the free beers that would inevitably be provided.
We actually had Ian about, was it like 3 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
4 years ago? We actually had Ian in to do a version, the very first version of Lone Pine that ever was very different from the Lone Pine you see today. And we actually did a big version of that, and we called it Lone Prime, because it was the first one. And we did was it the 1000th brew? So, yeah. Also very serendipitous, because we're going to be releasing our 2000th brew Lone Wine in the next couple weeks, which actually after this podcast, Ian and I are going to sample together, because he has yet to try it. So
amazing. So we've talked about this. I think it was one of the first things that you kind of mentioned. And I know that for people that are listeners of Canadian Football Perspective and they know our partnership with you guys, we always give them the promo code, but we also always promise them some exclusive little tidbits and things that are coming down the pipeline here. Can you offer up a little bit, Sam, on Lone Pine Wine and exactly what this is going forward? Just a little snippet, just enough to keep people interested.
Well, it was our 2000th brew and our first ever barley wine. So we just tweaked our Lone Pine recipe and turned it up to 11. Like literally, it's 11.2%. It's just an amped-up version of Lone Pine, but more like an American-style barley wine. So still lots of hops, but big malt. We brewed it actually a couple months ago, and it's actually been aging. So as we let it condition, it's going to come out mid-August. So it's still got a couple weeks left, but we're super excited about it. It is our 2000th brew, so it's a big milestone for us. We're excited about, and then as our 10th anniversary comes up, we're excited about our next 10 years as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And I think people will be very excited. I'm jealous you guys are getting to sample that this afternoon. It's a perfect afternoon to sample that. And hey, I thought it was really cool that CFP's coming up on our 200th episode being put out. You guys just blew us out of the water with your 2000th brew. So big respect for that as always. Let's crack open these Gateway Kölsch and take a look at them here. Can design as always beautiful. I know, got lots of fun stuff happening on there. Maybe you can let us know off the bat here, Sam, as we pour exactly the Kölsch style. And because I know this is probably sacrilegious for you guys, knowing beer the way that you do, 500 times better than I do. But when we did the Spring Saison earlier on this year, I said to you, there's always beer styles that somebody like me who enjoys their beer, loves to have all sorts of different styles of beer, but doesn't really understand what I'm actually drinking. The Spring Saison is one that when I see it at the LCBO or online at Sawdust City Beer, I will look at it and I'll say, ooh, I like that style. I don't really know why, but I like it. Kölsch is the same thing for me. It's one of those where when I see it, I go, I know I like Kölsch, but I have no idea why I like it. So explain to me the style here and why people that are endeared to Kölsch a little bit, why they like it.
Well, truthfully, we're not allowed to really call it a Kölsch. A Kölsch is an appellation. Like, you actually have to be from the city confines of Cologne, Germany, to call your beer a Kölsch. So while I was at school, I got a chance to go into Cologne a few times, and I was actually there. It was one of the last trips I took. I got to go around call them again and visit some of the Kölsch breweries. But it's a lagered ale, which means that it's an ale. It's fermented at ale temperatures, but then lagered at cool temperatures. They didn't really know what they were doing back in the day, so this is just how they did it. And as time went on, they figured it out. But it's basically like before a Pilsner was a Pilsner or a Helles lager, this is sort of like that style. Very pale, very drinkable. It's like the quintessential lawnmower beer. Right after, like, actually, if you look down here, Ian,
Stage.
we got a Stonga down here. It's right down. It's gonna be too hard to
I'll
get.
say it.
It's like a 200-liter glass. It's a long tube, and all the cultures are served in these glasses like that. You just pull them back,
Wow.
and that's how you drink them. You go from brewery to brewery in the city center of Cologne, which is, underneath the shadow of the Dome, which is this huge cathedral in the middle of the city, and it's absolutely beautiful. And the river, the Rhine, runs right past the city as well, and it's just a great way to spend an afternoon. Like I said, I've been lucky enough to do it a few times, so the style itself has always been something special to me, and that's why it was one of the first ones we ever did. I think that a lot of breweries caught on to that, and you saw that there's many in Ontario because it offers the drinkability of a lager with the ease of making an ale, and it sort of sounds romantic and mysterious, so it kind of leans into that craft thing. So you'll see a lot of breweries doing a Kölsch or Kölsch style ale in their core lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. And listening to you talk about those tall glasses and you just shoot them, it makes me feel like it's an ice wine shooter in Niagara in the winter, the way you're talking about, where people just go from place to place to place and tall little test tube shooters and start popping them back, but significantly larger, I'm guessing. But what's the first thing that people should expect when they end up popping open a can of the Gateway Kölsch?
Well, it's very light, well attenuated. You get a little bit of we use a Pilsner malt, so we get a nice cracker malt. It's a little bit, get that sort of, a lot of people say hay. I always hear that, but it's like malty.
Firm malt.
Yep. A little bit of spice from the noble hops. We use Spalter hops, which is a German noble hop. It's not in any way a in-your-face beer. It's just a easy drinking sort of day beer. And it's designed to be like that because that's, how you drink it. Like it's like they said, and when you're drinking it, you have to put your coaster over top to tell them to stop, and they just mark off your coaster every time you have another one. So at the end, your tab is just these checks on a coaster.
Oh, wow.
And the waiters all have a certain look. They're professional Kölsch waiters. They walk around with this tray that has maybe 20 Stongas on it, and you just pull it off, and they're going like this. They're always walking back to the taps and filling it up, and they're in their professional beer cellar outfit with a tie and like armbands and stuff, and the whole rigmarole. They all have aprons. It's quite a thing.
That's fantastic.
It's something I think you should experience if you get a chance. The downtown is like a big party center. It's the same if you go, a couple 100 kilometers east to Dusseldorf. They have the same sort of pomp and circumstance for their alt beer. And the two of them, these cities, they're like Shelbyville and Springfield. They both hate each other style of beer, and they just say one's garbage and the other one's not.
Amazing. And Ian, when you take a Gateway Kölsch back, when you get the first kind of taste and sense of it, what do you get?
I mean, it's a simple beer in the sense that it's traditional. 4 ingredients brewed to a German style, right? So your malt, your hops, your water, your yeast. That's it. So there's nowhere for anything to hide. It's clean, crisp. There's a reason I think Sam called it Gateway. It's literally supposed to be. It's a pun on the gateway to the north sign in Gravenhurst, and also kind of symbolizes it's a gateway into craft. So if you were a macro drinker or someone really into Bud or Bud Light or anything, any kind of a macro style lager, you could pour someone this, and I don't think they'd turn their nose up at it. You could probably appreciate what's going on here pretty well. So
I'm intrigued too when you say that there's really nowhere to hide, because we had talked about that previously, Sam. Which beer was it that we were talking about where it was just, it might have been one of the lager series, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe Dad, I think, was when we were talking.
Definitely Dad. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were saying, like, when you have nowhere to hide, you got to be able to do it in a simple way. You need to be able to do it really specifically and make it kind of come out the same way multiple times over. And I'm wondering, Ian, from your perspective of doing home brewing, exactly how difficult that art is looking from the outside in.
On these type of styles can be a little more difficult at a homebrew scale, because you're not overloading it with hops, so or any other ingredients. So your room for error in how you're fermenting, or your mash attenuation, or your pH, all that, the real kind of nitty gritty science backbone of brewing can really affect a beer like this, so that it comes through, when you're in the final product as to what you're going to get. So if you're a careful home brewer, it's easy to do. Or an advanced home brewer and you have the right equipment. If you're a beginner, it's a little bit easier to stick to a hoppy pale ale or something a little easier to pull off in the beginning stages, but it's certainly not unattainable to do at a home scale.
One of the big things, the difference is as much as you can recreate a lot of recipes at home as a home brewer, and there's plenty of books and magazines and websites to help you do that. One of the big differences, and for me, was always temperature control. We have ultimate control over everything that goes on in our tanks.
I have a basement.
Yeah.
So that can be a bit of a wild card depending on the weather, the time of year, kind of style. In the fall I might do something like this because I know the basement's a bit cooler and it will hold. I can hold 16 degrees down there, no problem. Where in the summer it's a little hotter, so I'll stick to more hoppier pale ales or something that won't bother, that kind of temperature won't bother. Yeah.
No, that is fascinating. Yeah. The ability to control your environment is so important to what you guys are doing. Depending on your economy of scale, it's going to change it, obviously, how big a batch you're able to make and how much it stays similar. But I'll ask you as well, Sam, for people that are kind of wondering about comparable styles or things that are out there that might be, I guess, kind of correlated to this, what would you say to them for that? Because I think people always look at these as individual styles and kind of being on their own island, and looking at things that are kind of in the wheelhouse or close to that they have an idea. Oh, okay, now I kind of get a sense for the area of the beer map that I'm looking at.
Well, the big thing about Kölsch is that it is a lagered ale. So we do ferment it a little colder than the rest of our ales. We do it at 19 instead of the regular 22. But if you're looking outside of that, like, you can find a blonde ale that probably somehow, like that more of an American style blonde ale, that will probably fit the bill. But if you're looking towards a German, you probably will look deeper into the lager world, somewhere in like a Munich Helles, or possibly a Dortmunder like Dad. A blonde pale lager that's not very bitter, very drinkable. And that's just what this is, other than the fact that they use the ale yeast. And like I said, when they first started doing this, they had no idea what yeast was. So, and I mentioned alt before. Alt just means old, and it's the same thing. It's a lagered ale. So when the name derived from the fact that it was made in the old way, in that they fermented it and then lagered it cool. And now they understand they can do these different yeasts and there are different strains. So that's where the lagers came from. But originally they didn't know, and it was just the way they made it. They made it the old way. And the big difference between alt and this, alt's more of a copper, a little bit more brown ale. Like, if you were looking at a spectrum there, it would be closer to like a British bitters. But this I would, put in the blonde / pale lager category.
Okay, interesting. There you go. So now people know the area that they are looking at with this one. Sam, Ian, thank you for this. It's fantastic, as always, to be able to catch up with you guys. Cheers, and don't have too much of the Lone Pine wine. I know it's Saturday night, but be careful, okay?
Cheers. Thanks, Marshall.
Thanks, Marshall.